welcome back to the Superhero Cinephiles podcast. Well, I'm your host, Perry Constantine, and for all of you, it's been 2 weeks, but for us, it's only been about 5 minutes or so because I'm back here with Kelen Conley, the B-Hyphen himself, to talk about Amazing Spider-Man 2. Kel, how you doing?
Chia. I'm great, man. I'm happy to be here, Perry. How are you?
I'm doing good, doing good. Got caffeinated up after our little hiatus. Got to
There you go.
see my daughter before she started see her before she started crying, and then
I got to say goodnight, and I'm sitting here sipping on a tasty beverage myself. So we're doing good.
good, awesome. And so obviously no news because it's the same day for us. But so we're just going to jump right into it and talk about the Amazing Spider-Man 2. 2014, I believe it was.
2014. You got it right. April 18th.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, May 2nd. That was Mexico. May 2nd is when it came out in the States.
So what were your thoughts on Amazing Spider-Man 2 when you saw it?
What a mess. There is so many different stories in this film that are trying to be put into one cohesive story, and they don't get there at all. The Green Goblin part feels like a different film. The Electro part feels like a different film. The Gwen parts are interwoven throughout all of this, which is really unfair to the story. Spoilers, everybody. Gwen doesn't make it. And then you have the Aunt May has his can't pay bills and is working on the side, but not telling Peter thing.
Yeah.
Which was really weird. And then you have Peter finding out more about his parents, and then the whole opening of the film is Mary and Peter on the plane, and the plane's like assassins.
Mary and Richard.
Or yeah, I'm sorry, Mary and Richard's on the plane, and the assassin's trying to take him out, and he successfully does, but. Then Richard's uploading these files and on some kind of Wi-Fi plane. By the way, I mean, obviously he was deep in it, but still he's like hanging on that last minute so he can get that 100% uploaded, and then we really barely touch on that the rest of the film. It is a big old mess. There's a lot of good ideas. There's a few bad ideas, and it's all shoved into one thing. Oh, and by the way, let's get Peter to graduation in the middle of this. Oh, and the Rhino's here. That happens.
And then we also get a Sinister Six tease at the end too.
Oh, a big Sinister Six.
Yeah.
Yes.
Where this
still waiting for that.
Because this was when Sony was trying to do because after Amazing Spider-Man, right? Avengers came out that same year, and that's everybody realized, oh shit, shared superhero universes are the new thing now. Because you had these crossover. You didn't have a big crossover like that until Avengers was the culmination of all these introductions. So
yes, it was.
After that, all these other places are like, shit, we got to play catch up. So on the CW, they're like, we got to bring in the Flash and we got to bring in Black Canary and all this, and then DC was like, we got to bring in Batman and Superman and have them fight, and then you had and then you had Sony's like, well, we've got all these Spider-Man characters. Let's make a Spider-Man universe. And they tried to do all that in this movie. This was the movie that they decided this was a lot like Batman v Superman in that way, in that there's just so much crammed in here to play catch up.
Yeah, there's a lot, man. And I am one of the few people on the planet who will still say that I enjoy watching Batman v Superman. I know it's bad. It has plenty of faults. I will not argue with you on any of those points, but I will sit there and watch that movie from start to finish. I just happen to enjoy it because apparently I hate myself. But you're totally right. I do get that vibe with Amazing Spider-Man 2, where they're just like, throw everything in there. It's not gonna matter. We're going to do another one here in 2016 anyway.
Yeah, because you've got the whole thing with the Sinister Six, because they were going to do a spin-off movie with the Sinister Six from this. You had Felicia as Harry's assistant because she was going to spin off into a Black Cat movie.
Yes. And I just saw her, and I completely forgot about her again that quickly. Yes.
Yeah.
Felicia was there. They were setting the seeds for the Green Goblin, of course, because I mean, we had a Goblin, but that's Harry, and Harry had some weird stories like, I'm dying, I need your blood, and one of the most awkward Spider-Man scenes in Andrew Garfield's career. He's like, "I can't give it to you, Harry." Blah blah blah. He's like, "You're just selfish." And I was like, "Man," and I who was the dude who played Harry, man?
Dale DeHaan.
Not a fan.
Mhm.
Not impressed. Not a fan. I'm I don't entirely blame him. It was a paycheck, and you know what they say about when they
Mhm.
back up a truckload of money and dump it on your front lawn, you're going to do that, and that's what he did. But he did not do anything for me as Harry. So
I think, you know what, I cut him a little bit of slack, and I think it's mostly the script. But I think
yeah,
with a better script, because I love James Franco in the original trilogy.
and that hurts him too, because
Yeah, yeah.
Franco was so good.
But the thing is though, Franco is such a pretty boy, and it's kind of like the thing we talked about in the first movie with Andrew Garfield. He's such a good looking guy. You can't really buy him as an outsider.
Mhm.
I have trouble buying, as much as I love Franco's performance, and it is much better than DeHaan's. I have a lot of trouble buying the whole neglected son type thing
Yeah, yeah.
with Franco.
Franco has trouble, especially because it's so young in his career at that
Mm-hmm.
point. I mean, this is like literally right after Freaks and Geeks when he got Spider
Yeah,
Man.
yeah.
So he didn't do too well in those emotional scenes, especially early in the early
Mm-hmm.
films. In Spider-Man 3, until he made his literal face turn,
Mm-hmm.
um, uh, like the scene in the cafe, like
Mm-hmm.
after he's come back to realizing who he is and stuff, and that waitress asks him how his food is, he goes delicious.
Oh, I
And he
love
does
that, the pie
the girl
scenes.
face. That's so good. Yeah, he's eating the pie. Like that. That's spot on. And then like 5 minutes later, like Peter's blowing half his face off with a pumpkin
Mm-hmm.
bomb, and he's like, "Oh man, I think I want to save my friend." All of a sudden, towards the end, but
Mm-hmm.
we're
Yeah,
not here to
yeah.
talk about Spider-Man 3. Oh God. But Franco did have some good beats in that film, but he did
Mm-hmm.
not carry the emotional weight of what Harry Osborn went through as Norman Osborn's son in the
Yeah.
comic.
Now, DeHaan, I think, is a much better fit for Harry as a character, but he was just given terrible, such terrible stuff to work with.
It's so weird. It's like Norman dies, you have the same poisoning. He meets up with Peter, and they have the most awkward hangout. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
hey man, I haven't seen you in years, and then it's like we're supposed to believe these two guys are friends, and it's like it's not connecting there. At least it didn't for me. So maybe it just
It also felt so out of left field, where it's like,
yes,
I mean,
okay,
like we go through this whole movie. His dad works at Oscorp. He's in Oscorp. Never once is there any mention of the fact that, oh, my best friend was Norman Osborn's son, or nothing like that. And the next movie, he says like, "Hey, Harry, the son of Norman Osborn, who I apparently was friends with all these years ago, and we just never talked about it again."
oh man, yeah, it was. Again, it just worked for the plot at the time for him
Mm-hmm.
to suddenly have this best friend, even though the whole first movie involved Oscorp heavily. But
Yeah.
I digress, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to do that a lot here.
um, but yeah, I give Dahan. I think Dahan tried the best he could, and it's just like nobody could have done a good job in that role, though.
You're right. I mean, literally, he was there to ultimately be the instrument of Gwen's death,
Right.
and the whatever the hell he was doing once he was the Goblin, with obviously he had just the sharp teeth and the
Mm-hmm.
bouffant kind of thing going, and he had the costume and everything like that, and such a weird. People give Venom so much crap, and again,
Mm-hmm.
Spider-Man 3, and no, Venom was not good in Spider-Man 3. Like they tried, it didn't work.
Mm-hmm.
But this just the whole time I sat there watching it the first time and then most recently, and I'm watching that final fight, and I know how it's going to end, and it's just like, man, like this this just doesn't, like it just felt like, let's do this real quick so that we can kill her. Like there was other ways to do it, man. Like I know you want to have the classic Goblin kill Gwen
Mm-hmm.
thing. You don't necessarily want it to be Electro by any means. Ooh, we've got to talk about Electro. Oh my god!
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But there was still, between me and you, your writer. I pretend to write. We could come up with like 10 different ways they could have still gotten to that point of Gwen falling to her death
Right.
without going that route and shoehorning it in the last, like that whole scene was like what, 12 minutes maybe
Yeah.
between the time the goblin showed up and Tom Gwen smacked. So
yeah, when I was rewatching it, I'm just like, this happened so quick. I'm like, wait. And I'm like, am I misremembering it? In my head, it felt like this was a longer scene.
no,
But it's not. It's really, and I was just sitting there. I'm like, I was more shocked by the fact. I'm like, wait a minute. That, even though I've seen this movie like several times, every time I'm just like, this feels like it should be longer.
Yeah,
I feel like,
I
mean, I'm like, did I doze off or something for a minute? I mean, it feels like there's a whole chunk missing here.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I wonder if it was longer, and I don't know how much the studio cut, how much it got edited out, because by no means have the extended version of the Amazing Spider-Man 2 sitting here where I could see deleted scenes and stuff like that. But I wonder, I would like to see what the original plan was, because that scene deserved to be longer. I feel like they played more into the Electro role, and they were like, okay, well, we can kind of just stick this here, and then everything will be cool. And it deserved way more for it to be such a pivotal character to die that way.
Yeah.
To then just be in that quick scene, because the falling feels a little like lengthy, and the way that eventually when it all ends and she gets to the bottom, like you feel like he's about to get her. So that's excellently done, because it's like he's right there on the cusp. So it's like, will he or won't he? Will he or won't he? And so I was definitely on the edge of my seat for that. But then by the time it's all said and done, it hadn't been any time at all.
Yeah, yeah. And it's, the weird thing is, though, the scene with Electro, once Electro is beaten, there's such a finality to that scene. It feels like the climax of the movie. Yeah.
Yes.
And it's just like this whole thing. It's like, wait a minute, did we accidentally edit in part of 3 into this movie?
And they might have, because it felt like end of the movie vibes. It's like, all right, they saved, everything's over. Let's wrap it up. Let's get everybody to the after party.
Yeah.
And then it's all of a sudden it's like, hey Peter. I'm like, oh come on, man.
I mean, and especially because that scene when Harry goes in to find the Goblin suit, right? You could have left that as a cliffhanger for the 3rd movie.
Yes.
That would have been a great cliffhanger for the 3rd movie.
Isn't that what they did in Spider-Man 2? Didn't Harry find the stuff?
Yeah, exactly. You're right. It's exactly what they did. It was the same thing. He finds the Goblin equipment. Yeah. One thing I will say about the Goblin in this movie, though, is I like that. I don't like the Goblin design here, but I like that they tried to do something a little bit more organic, as opposed to just the Power Ranger style mask in the first in that Willem Dafoe wore.
One of the most interesting casting choices or costume design choices ever.
It was so weird. Every time I watch that movie and you can see his face moving beneath the black mesh, and I'm just like,
yeah, like how did he not know it was Norman, man? Like you can literally look through there. I'm like, dude, Norman? Like, I'm not Norman. I'm the Green Goblin. Like, dude,
I always feel like I'm at Disney World.
Big Disney vibes.
Yeah.
Big Disney vibes. But William Dafoe pulled it off is the crazy part.
Yeah.
Made it believable. Believable, air quotes.
So I am glad they tried something a little bit more organic with the Goblin in this movie. They swung for it. It didn't work, but they tried. And I like that. I like that part about it, at least.
I'm still hoping for today that I will see just whoever's playing Norman Osborn, or hell, I don't care if it's Osborn, I don't care if it's Kingsley as Hobgoblin. I just want to see someone slip on a classic looking Goblin costume, either the purple or green or the orange and blue, and pull that ghost mask over their face, and then it's like, that's the Green Goblin. Like, it's not that hard, people. I know you're like, he'll look stupid. Like, not in 2021. There's so many ways to do it.
Yeah, they could easily do it now. I mean, it's so hard to think about where to begin with this movie, because, like you said, there's so much going on here.
Well, let's go ahead and start with Electro, man.
I was so excited for Jamie Foxx to be playing Electro, because he is such a good actor, and
Oscar winner.
Yeah.
Oscar winner Jamie Foxx delivered this performance. I don't know who I don't know where the source material for Electro is drawn from. Now, when we first meet Max Dillon, he worked for the power company, he had the accident and everything, Stan Lee's version. There was a few I remember specifically from Ejectiveless Spider-Man in the 90s. They did this story. Lee Weeks, I think, was either drawing it or something, where it was the Light the Night story with Electro, and it showed how down and out Electro was when he wasn't trying to be a supervillain and stuff. And then he got this big plan. He's like, I'm going to take down Spider-Man again. And it was like this 3-issue arc. But I feel like a lot of those vibes were pulled in because they made Max an absolute loser. And
I mean, I was watching this, and the entire time I'm watching it, I'm thinking to myself, what idiot watches Batman Forever, sees Jim Carrey's performance before he becomes the Riddler, and thinks, that's a good superhero villain origin story.
It's the exact same.
And it's exactly Jim Carrey at the beginning of Batman Forever, because he's got this weird, even to like the crazy person wall with like all these clippings of Spider-Man.
Yeah.
It's
hey it's your birthday, Max. Thanks, Spider-Man.
He's doing it in a deep voice and stuff like that.
Yes. And even after that, it's like, okay, even if I hadn't bought into him being so nerdy and dorky and then having an accident, after that, they could have made him so much cooler. And it just seemed like he spent most of his time being a dang old pawn for the plot, you know. And there was never really, I never felt like he was a legitimate threat. I was like, I know Peter's going to figure this out. Like,
yeah. Well, also there's that whole thing with him, like, just being so cartoonishly attention starved, right? Like when he's in the elevator with Gwen and he's like, oh yeah, I've got this party and a bunch of celebrities gonna be coming and everything, and I'm just like,
why?
Yeah. And then she gets her floor. It's like, oh, this is my floor. It was nice talking to you, Max. And he's like, she remembers my name. It's like, dude, you just told her 5 minutes ago.
Right. I mean, that's common courtesy for most people. It's just,
and well, like even when Harry breaks him out of Ravencroft and he's like, the reason he finally agrees is because Harry says, I need you. And then he's like, you need me?
Yes, that's as bad as Martha.
God, it's like, yeah. it's like, can we be best friends?
Like, oh man, I can't wait to go skipping through the fields together and having a picnic and stuff. Like, why does Max need a friend so badly? And then for his origin to happen the way it was, he's literally leaving. And he's like, you got to go fix that thing right now, blah, blah, blah. And then he just so happens to slip and fall into electric eels. Is that what it was?
Yeah. They're like, it was like some way to generate electricity using electric eels.
Yes. More animals with more testing at Oscorp. Way to go, Oscorp.
Yeah.
I'm sure your accident sign, you know, so many days without an accident is it stays at 0.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Good Lord. I did enjoy the very first scene that they shared together though, with Spider-Man and Max and him saving him and everything.
Yeah.
Because again, Garfield's outstanding as Spider-Man this entire film. He brings it. I think he's better as Spider-Man in this film than he was in the first film, and I love that portrayal too. The costume looks amazing.
Exactly, yeah.
Amazing. Like I saw that and I was like, oh my God, they nailed it.
They nailed it. Yeah.
And even the Homecoming and Far From Home versions, obviously we got tweaks and stuff, and that's pretty true to it. But the Amazing Spider-Man 2 has the spot-on comic book costume, and I've never seen it look better. And I would literally just look at high-def pictures of that costume because I was just so in awe of it.
The one thing that I think that the Homecoming suit improved on was having the expressive eyes.
Yes, the eyes are very cool.
That was just such a creative way, because that's something they do in the comics, right? And it's obviously it's comic books. You can get away with that stuff.
It used to make me mad as a kid. I'm like, his eyes are attached to his mask. Why are they doing that? That's so stupid. Blah blah blah. But then especially once I started writing and stuff, I realized that that's how you convey expression,
exactly
on a face that never changes.
Yeah,
you know.
And I always thought like, well, they'll never be able to do that in live action. And then they found a way to make it work in live action. Like that's it was brilliant.
Yes.
But other than that, like, yeah, and especially the fact that they went with the big eyes in that costume.
Yes.
Like, I love that. That was because that was my Spider-Man growing up, right? That was like the Mark Bagley Spider-Man with the big eyes that covered like half the face.
Exactly. Only complaint I had about Big Eyes is when they try to give him nose holes in his mask, and I was like, you don't have nose holes. Like, somebody's just gonna be like, "Sup? I know who you are now." Like, come on, that's a little ridiculous. The costume is great. The interaction with him and Max, though, is again that's who Spider-Man was. He saved his life. I mean, he had a genuine interaction with people. Something that I say on my podcast all the time is like, try to have genuine interactions with people. You don't know what they're going through.
Right.
Max was down in the dumps and he hated his life. Ironically enough, it ended up biting him in the ass later. Spider-Man had a genuine interaction with him. He was kind to him, and that gave Max something to go on. It gave him some hope, and it gave him a weird obsession, of course. But again, that just, it's really cool how Garfield Spider-Man is really the Spider-Man that we all grew up on from the comics.
Yeah. Well, also and the fact that he remembers Max later when he becomes Electro.
Oh yeah.
I mean, that was because like there's not a really good explanation of how much time passes in this movie, but you get the sense that this movie takes place over the span of like several months.
Yeah, because graduation day is when it starts.
Yeah,
and then she's supposed to go. Where was she going again?
London.
She was going to go to London, and in the summer, of course, obviously after school, and then so by the time everything wraps up, it's like fall, right?
Yeah.
It's like fall.
Almost. Yeah, because it's later than that. It's like a year passes at by the end because you see him go with like all the seasons changing.
Yes, I was going to say there was a season changing montage. So some time definitely passed, but
even the main events of this movie take place over the course of at least it's at least been like a month between the time when he saves Max and the time when Max becomes Electro. Right. Yeah. It's been at least a month. And
how many people has he saved since
exactly then? Yeah. And he's still, and it takes him a minute, obviously, because he saved so many damn people. Right. But the fact that he does still remember. Right.
And that's something Peter Parker
exactly
do.
Yeah.
Spider-Man remembers people. I mean, that's the reason why he's so obsessed about dumb stuff, because it's like he's like, oh, I can't believe I did this, and then he's always beating himself up about something, and it'd be something that anybody else would be able to look over. But that's what makes him who he is, because he remembers things, he's affected by it, and he tries not to repeat his mistakes.
Yeah,
he's just so obsessive about his errors and things like that, or his interactions.
One thing I think this movie did too, and that made it, I think Garfield elevated his Peter Parker performance in this movie, and I think having the high school graduation helped, because it took him out of that environment, and it was much more like the college Peter Parker, and you get more of a sense of like the fact, because like in the comic books, Peter Parker is neurotic as fuck,
to say the least.
Yeah, and Garfield really does a good job of capturing that, I think, in this movie.
Yeah, he's all over the place. Like he's trying to figure out what he's going to do and everything after he graduates. He's trying to figure out him and Gwen, and in the back of his mind, freaking George is just chirping like, you can't be with her, you can't be with her. They break up before a graduation party, like that's such a Peter move. Like like literally all he had to do is just go in and enjoy the graduation party. And he's like, she's like, this is about what my father said to you. It's like, Gwen, I don't want you to get. And she's like, you know what, blah blah blah. And their chemistry again is great, but I feel like again, because their story is so interwoven in these different pieces of the film, that some of it gets lost. And then also, especially with the grand gesture on the bridge with the webs and stuff, that was super cute. I enjoyed that. But then it's like, dog, you really put a big old target on her back, a real big target. Because anybody, if Captain George Stacy can figure out who you are, I mean, you literally just wrote your love out to the woman you love on the bridge. Like, maybe not your best move, Parker.
Yeah. But I'm glad you mentioned the him and Gwen, because I think they do a really good job of handling, more so than in Spider-Man 2, with the whole, because you had a very similar setup in both the end of Amazing Spider-Man and the end of the Raimi Spider-Man, where Peter decides, I can't be with you because it's too dangerous, And then in the next movie, you've got them having this weird, awkward situation, but it feels a lot more realistic in Amazing Spider-Man 2 than it did in Spider-Man 2.
Yeah, mostly because Mary Jane had moved away from him so much
Mm-hmm.
in the Raimi film, and then for them to kind of conveniently get put back together by the end, so that she can accidentally find out who he is. Like he didn't want to tell her who he was.
Well, plus the whole thing where he's like, because in it makes more sense in Amazing Spider-Man for him to still be trying to stay connected with her and all that, because it's not really his choice to break up with her.
Right.
It's he's trying to be the good guy and try to honor George's wishes. But in the Raimi films, it was entirely his choice. And then he's doing this thing where he's reciting poetry to her, and it's just like, it's so bad and cringeworthy.
Right, man. He's like leading her on, but he's like, oh, not too close though, not too close. We can't be together. I'm Spider-Man. I mean,
at this party honoring her new boyfriend. I mean, it's
I love those kind of parties when you
God,
what you love is honoring her new boyfriend.
God, I felt so bad for John Jameson in those movies because he's like the best guy.
Yeah,
and it's like he even says like, what about your friend Peter Parker? Aren't you going to invite him to the wedding? And then
she's like, no. And literally the moment he lost her is when she did the upside down kiss with him, and it's like, oh, it doesn't feel the same. Probably because you're not suffocating from all the rain. But
yeah. But in Amazing, it makes so much more sense, and their interactions feel so much real because they both want to be together, but they know there's this thing between them because of George's death and everything, and it's such a real. It feels so real. Like it feels like such a real interaction with them.
I really thought it was cool, the opening of the Amazing Spider-Man 2 with the web swinging, like the first person point of view. Like when I saw it a little bit in the trailer, I was like, oh, that looks corny as hell. But once you saw it in the movie theater and stuff, I every time that's on, I will stop and watch that scene because I think that's a really cool scene. And again, that's after years of us watching Raimi Spider-Man swinging through the city and does a couple flips. And then sticks the landing next to the American flag because Spider-Man. First thing you think of when you think of American flag. But to see Garfield Spider-Man be that agile web swinger and just have such fun going through the city and just barreling through there, just like we do in the video games now.
Yes, yeah.
It was very cool, and it still holds up today. And they still haven't even tried to recreate anything like that in the newer Spider-Man films. They're like, oh, well, they kind of got that one right, so we don't have to keep trying to do the first person point of view on the web swinging. But they nailed that opening. I really like that.
They did, yeah. And I love how his ringtone is the Spider-Man theme song.
Come on, Peter. Captain George Stacy built this in a cave. And you got the Spider-Man ringtone on your phone.
Yeah.
Like, oh, hey, you disappear an awful lot, and your ringtone is,
I remember some people getting pissed off. I remember one guy on social media getting pissed off about it and saying like, it takes you out because breaks the suspension of disbelief. I'm like, but they did that in the Raimi films too. You had that subway performer who was singing
Spider-Man, yeah. And that was classic. Everybody just laughed it off. And I mean, even in the Iron Man film, like he's playing the Iron Man theme, like when they're at the casino, like the very opening scene, and like when him and Rhodey are on the plane with the stewardesses, and they have a Ghostface Killer video playing in the background, whose alias is Tony Stark. So it's like, come on, guys, like that did not take you out of the movie. You complain about it. There's plenty of other stuff that you want to complain about.
Chris Cooper, I thought, what a wasted opportunity.
Yeah,
because he would have been such an awesome Norman Osborn.
And to see by the time I saw this, Norman was the end all be all Spider-Man villain for me. Like it or not, main orchestrator of the Clone Saga. I was a big fan of that final fight between them. Not so much what had happened the years following, before like JMS got a hold of it and stuff. Like Paul Jenkins did some cool Goblin stuff.
He had that the Return of the Goblin story. I just reread that recently. That was really good.
Yeah, I got that back there.
In fact, you know what? And it had such an ambiguous ending, right? Because it looked like he was gonna kill himself, and especially you get that silent panel with just the outside, and then the next with the birds flying, you get this. Oh my God, he shot himself.
Right.
And then they bring him back, and they just like, oh no, he didn't.
Like, oh, he's fine.
Yeah, I mean that was such. I think that was such a perfect ending to the Goblin story.
That's one of the best Goblin stories for sure. And then next thing you know, Mark Millar has Peter beat them in the head with a mailbox, and when they did Marvel Knight Spider-Man.
Oh God, yeah.
That crazy shush story that they threw together and stuff. So. And
then you had the Dark Reign stuff and all that bullshit.
Yeah, and some of that worked, but Norman running the entire Marvel.
No. I mean, I could buy if it was Baron Zemo, but I cannot buy Norman Osborn in that role.
His ego's way too big.
Yeah.
That's not what Norman wants. Norman wants to replace everybody with Goblin people. That's his main goal, apparently. But it was definitely a wasted opportunity because we didn't see. Did we see Norman in the first movie?
No, he was mentioned.
Yes,
and then the guy at the end when Connors is in Ravencroft, there was speculation because that was played by Michael Massey. A lot of people thought that he was Norman Osborn because he doesn't speak. Well, he doesn't. No, in the credits it's just like the Man in Black.
Right.
And it wasn't until Michael Massey comes back at the end of this movie, then you find out he's Mr. Fears. But yeah, everybody. Which honestly, that was a little disappointing too because Michael Massey also would have been an amazing Norman Osborn.
Yeah. Yes, he would have. So that's two missed opportunities.
Yeah.
But to have Norman finally be on there, and it's like, okay, so this is going to lead to Goblin somehow. And I didn't know anything going in. I didn't know about who was Goblin and stuff like that. So I'm thinking for sure. I was like, all right, we're going to get Green Goblin. We're going to see what this iteration's about.
Especially when you see his hand when he hands the data thing down, and it's like he's transformed. And you're like, and then when he dies, the whole time I'm thinking like he's not dead. He's just the transformation is just fully taken over now, and now he's going to become the Goblin.
And again, that might have been something they were doing in another film, but they never got there.
Yeah.
So that was definitely a loss though, because it's like, oh, Norman Osborn, and like this is a big deal. That's like saying, okay, Batman film, here's Joker. We're gonna kill him 5 minutes later. Like, why?
Yeah.
What part did that serve other than make Harry realize he was sick and it's on Spider-Man's blood?
And also, I don't understand what Harry's urgency is because Norman Osborn is like what 50 or 60 in this movie.
He lived a very long life, yeah. And Norman tried to tell him he had a shorter time, like he didn't have long. He was trying to. I think he did mention something about it being accelerated, but Harry immediately went into panic mode.
Yeah.
And he knew that he couldn't throw money at it and fix it. So I wonder how much of the problem came from that. Because as an Osborn, he's always had money.
Yeah.
And for him to not be able to just throw money at his medical issue that'll go away, and he literally has to figure something out on his own, that became immediately frustrating for him and just showed how hot-headed he was. And they're trying to show Harry's hot-headed side because obviously Harry was more of a hothead than Norman was, even with the Goblin formula at its peak. Like Norman was not quick to anger. Norman was always like, okay, I'll remember that. And then I'll come back and get you later. Harry was always like, he was always so emotional because to get real deep into it, that stems from the abuse he suffered at Norman and neglect and stuff like that in the comic books. Shout out to Spidey Kicks Butt for writing all those articles all those years ago about it. But that's just him trying to survive after his mom died, and that's who he was. And then of course he kind of became, not in the comics so much, but then him and Peter became best friends, and he was the one with the money and things like that. And so that's kind of who he developed into. There was no reason for this iteration of Harry Osborn to be so quick to like, I have to figure this out now. I'm dying.
Yeah.
I have like 10 hours left. It's like, no, bro, you probably can sit down and breathe for a second.
Yeah. But it's just the plot requires him to.
It didn't.
It's just and they're just in such a rush to get all this stuff in this movie.
It's a very fast movie. like a lot is happening all the time. Like it's nonstop. And I was thinking about that. The very first half of Black Widow is like that too.
Hmm.
Before we get to the prison and everything, it's very action, 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 action.
Hmm.
Breathe, and it's like okay, it's going down. It's like action, 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 action. And I'm like, dang man, this is pretty awesome. And then they slow things down as the
Mm.
movie progressed. And this one is where Black Widow was action, 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 action with a purpose. Amazing Spider-Man 2 is action, 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 feed the plot,
Hmm.
even if the plot doesn't need feeding.
Yeah, yeah. Um, and we also, Ed, you could tell that they I love that we get J. Jonah Jameson in this movie, but we never see him on screen because they couldn't get J.K. Simmons back.
Yes, yeah. So we did get JJJ, but ultimately, as proven in Far From Home, there is only one person who should
Hmm.
grace the screen as J. Jonah Jameson, and
You
that's
know, we were talking about the 2 episodes ago when my buddy on talk about Logan, and we were talking about the.
I didn't realize you hadn't talked about Logan, or I'd probably been my pick. Like, let's talk about Logan. I
Yeah,
would
we
feel like crying for the next 2 hours.
but we were talking about some Far From Home news and talking, and he said he's like, you know what, we were talking about Spider-Verse and all that, and he said he's like, I want J. Jonah Jameson to be one of those constants in the multiverse where it's always J.K. Simmons in every reality.
Hey man, that'd be a beautiful thing.
Hmm.
I don't see why not. Because when you get it right, you get it right. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
that's why we're probably never going to see another Nick Fury. Like, can you imagine something that, God forbid,
Hmm.
happens to Samuel? They're like, okay, let's get another black ball dude. Like, no, man, it's got to be Samuel, man. You
Yeah,
stole
yeah.
his likeness and everything. Like, it's only right.
Hmm.
It's only right, Marvel.
um, well, actually, they got permission to do his likeness. Like they asked because they had to ask him, and
Yeah,
he said I'll do it if you agree to let me be Nick Fury in the movies.
he that was the deal. Yeah,
Yeah.
so a little Easter egg for you guys in case
Mm.
you're wondering how we got here. That was a very cool idea. Obviously,
Yeah.
it paid years later. But
Yeah.
pretty cool.
Absolutely. Yeah. Um, you know what? Also, I really liked, even though her story just seems to go nowhere. I did like Sally Field's Aunt May in this movie.
Yeah, we didn't talk too much about Sally Field in the first
Hmm.
one. Um, she, I, as much as I loved Rosemary
Hmm.
Harris as Aunt May, and she was the perfect elderly Aunt May, and she's
Hmm.
like, "Oh, Peter, I have two quarters rubbed together. Please take them." And it was perfect for the Raimi films.
Hmm.
She brought a lot of Ultimate Aunt May to the table
Yeah.
because Ultimate Aunt May's a badass man. She was
Yes. Yeah.
any kind of shit from issue 1 until the day she cradled Peter in her arms, and at the culmination of the series, man, she took no shit from nobody,
Hmm.
and she took the punches and she rolled with them, and she was even with Ben passed and everything, man. Like she wasn't anybody who really let the world beat her down, man. She was very headstrong. And Sally Field's portrayal of
Hmm.
Aunt May and that got a lot of that. Now, do I agree so much with the hiding from Peter that they don't have money? I mean,
Hmm.
I'm sure Peter knows that they don't have that much money
Yeah.
anyway. I
Yeah.
mean, they live in a nice house in Queens, but beyond that, I mean, it just kind of is what it is. I mean,
Hmm.
he obviously is needs a scholarship to go to college, and they didn't make him look as poor as Peter
Hmm.
did in the Raimi films. But she 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 brought a lot of the ultimate portrayal in. Her scenes with Peter, though, I thought they really had a nice chemistry in this film, and they had
Hmm.
a little bit of
Yeah.
it in the first one, but for as little screen time as they got, like you said, you really felt the relationship, just like you mentioned Ben and Peter having that
Hmm.
relationship in Spider-Man, Amazing Spider-Man 1. We got that in Amazing Spider-Man 2 between May and Peter, and even at the end when he's pretty much sulking and mourning in his room and stuff, and like you expected her to go in and like give some big speech about
Hmm.
like, oh well, these things happen and you got to dust yourself off and everything like that, and she doesn't do that. Like but you can tell she's still there for him, and
Hmm.
he is and understands that. She respects the fact that he needs distance, and you can sense, and it's a kudos to both actors that you could sense the emotion, her being there for him emotionally,
Hmm.
without her coming in and being like, "Now, Peter, have some wheat cakes and get back out
Hmm.
there
Yeah.
because the
Yeah.
rhino's about to go tear up the city again." So
Now,
Sally should
did you
definitely
get the
go.
sense that, and it's even more amazing because she hated these movies.
A lot of them do. A lot of them do, man.
She hated these movies, and like she was on Howard Stern, and she was asked about preparation for the role, and she's like, "No, I didn't really do anything to prepare for it." And she said like, you try to do the best you can, but you can't shove 10 pounds of shit into a 5 pound bag. So yeah, she said the only thing she liked about these movies was working with Garfield. Um,
I bet she did. She's like,
but
hey, I used to date Burt Reynolds.
but despite the fact that she obviously hated the script and the like, she's a good enough actress that none of that comes across in her performance.
Right.
And
Right. It's
did you get
important.
did you get the sense at the end that she actually does know that Peter's Spider-Man?
I'd say I'd say throughout both films there was heavy hints dropped
Mm-hmm.
that she knew.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I feel like they were building towards if something's going to happen to Aunt May, or
Yeah.
if they were going to do a reveal, it was going to be her coming to him and saying, like, I'm not fucking stupid, Peter.
Mm-hmm.
You're Spider-Man, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah.
And I feel like her portrayal of Aunt May got that. If you tell Rosemary Harris Aunt May that, she's curtains, you know? I don't think she could have
Mm-hmm.
handled it. But this Aunt May totally could have handled it. And I feel like they were going to build to the point where she just looked at him like, you're Spider-Man, I'm not stupid. And Peter wasn't the best in these films with protecting the secret. We
No,
know.
I mean, one of my favorite lines is when she walks into his room and she's like, "Why is your face so dirty?" He's like, "I was cleaning the chimney." She's like, "You were cleaning the chimney? We don't have a chimney."
Oh, what an idiot! The montage is him coming in at different times
Mm-hmm.
from superheroing and
Mm-hmm.
crime fighting was very cool too. I like that because Peter's always messing up his costume,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
that was well done.
But yeah, I loved just her interactions with Peter were so good, and like you said, like there's a lot, she does bring in a lot of the Ultimate version. Up until Marissa Tomei, the Ultimate version of Aunt May was my favorite version of the character.
Yeah,
And it's funny, like in all these movies, Aunt May keeps getting younger and younger.
and Peter does too.
Yeah, yeah. I remember one meme after Homecoming came out where it's like in the next reboot, Aunt May's going to be a teenager and Spider-Man's going to be a baby.
Spider baby, Spider baby. Um, yeah, my wife Angel, we were watching Homecoming, and for the first time, probably within the last year. So for her, seeing Homecoming and Far From Home, and she's like, she's too young to be Aunt May, and I was like, she ain't that young, but I mean, you look at her, I mean, every dude who's not Peter is literally trying to get in her pants. Like even the dude at the restaurant in
I know.
Homecoming, he's
I
like,
think
I
he
didn't order
larps you.
this.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then I just love the idea of Tony Stark hitting on Aunt May. It's just like,
I know. And even the deli guy who ended up getting his deli blown up, he said it in a different language, and then Peter came back and he's like, I'm not making your sandwich.
And we're talking too much about Homecoming now, but anyway, but yeah,
I've been all over the place.
Yeah, but her
movie.
It is, yeah, exactly. So we're on brand.
Absolutely.
And going back to the first movie too, I do like she had these little flashes of like you get little hints of her relationship with Ben in the first movie as well, because like the meatloaf scene is one of my favorite scenes, right? When he comes back after he gets bitten and he's like getting he's like, this is the best meatloaf ever. And he's like, he really likes that. And he's like, yeah. She's like, something strange is going on. He's like, yeah, nobody likes your meatloaf.
No.
And then she's like, and then afterwards she's like, why did you ever tell me that you didn't like my meatloaf?
Oh man. Those are the sweet moments that we don't get enough because Ben's ultimately has to die.
Yeah, yeah.
No matter what story you're telling, Ben's
but I think that's why that's why I bought Ben and May in these movies as being more realistic people than I did in the Raimi films. Because in the Raimi films, it just felt like, he's just doing the lead Ditko, Uncle Ben and elderly Aunt May thing. Yeah. And which is fine, right? I mean, obviously he was trying to pay homage to that, and obviously I get it, but I do like more that Ben and May feel like their own characters in these movies.
Yes, and that's definitely important. Because can you imagine if they tried to do a Spider-Man film without May or Ben or anything like that? Or well, obviously we've got one without Ben, but May
Mhm.
is a central character in Spider-Man's story,
Yeah.
despite what some people may say. Um, it's important that he has that parental figure to kind of
Mhm.
bounce off of.
Yeah.
That's not necessarily named Tony Stark.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, she was great, and all right. It's so hard to. You know what? One of the other things I really liked in that scene with Electro was the scene where Peter works with the firefighting crew and he wears the helmet.
Yes, and he has the helmet on. That's so Peter. That's so
Yeah.
Spider-Man. Yeah. That scene was very good. The whole chase scene through with Alexi
Oh yeah,
throughout
yeah.
the beginning of the movie when he's trying to get to graduation. That's just so well done. And Gwen keeps calling him. He's like, "Yeah, I'm 5 minutes away." She's like, "What's that noise?" It's like, "Nothing." He's like, "You're fighting crime, are you?" He's like, "No, I'm on my way."
It's such a Spider-Man scene too. Like
Uh-huh.
that scene right there is the perfect encapsulation of who Spider-Man is, right? He's this guy, he's a crime fighter, but he's also got these demands in his personal life as well. Like that scene is the perfect distillation of who Spider-Man is.
Yeah. Yeah, after that scene, I was like, "Oh, we're in for a good one."
Mm-hmm.
I got a good feeling about this, and then it
Yeah.
just went.
Yeah, yeah.
And didn't he get the graduation and like kiss her on stage and stuff?
Yeah, that was another thing. The whole that was we were talking about in the last episode, the cocky Peter vibe with
Yeah,
playing that up
that's
way too much.
too cool for
Yeah,
Peter Parker.
exactly. Yeah.
He does not grab the girl at graduation and do that.
And then give the principal or whatever a high five, right?
Right. I mean, it looked great on film.
It did look
That's
great, yeah, but it's just
not Peter Parker.
no.
Oh man.
But that opening, I'm glad you mentioned that opening scene, and just like the whole thing where he's trying to catch all the vials and stuff,
Oh yeah.
and then also when he finally beats Alexi and he pulls his pants down with the webbing again, that's such a Spider-Man thing.
Just for no reason, because like everybody says, he's always like, shut up, God, shut up. I'm trying to concentrate." And obviously, one of the reasons that he's always wisecracking, he's distracting his opponent.
Yeah, yeah.
Because as we now know, like Peter didn't know shit about fighting other than using his powers, you know.
Right. It's
So
if
that
not for the
was
spider, not for the spider sense, he would have gotten killed long ago.
right. So that's just one way to keep his opponents off their toes is by constantly annoying them.
Yeah.
And then he just does it so much, he just does it to his people he's teaming up with as well. So he gets on superheroes' nerves too. But it's a really beautiful thing to see those touches like that.
Yeah.
To add the bow to everything.
It reminds me of do you remember the one of the issues of Ultimate Spider-Man when he goes and he meets Kingpin at a restaurant or something,
Oh, yeah.
and then Kingpin looks down, he's like, "Young man, did you web my feet to the floor?" And Spider-Man's like, "Maybe." He's like, "What possible pleasure would you derive from that?" And Spider-Man's just like, "See, you don't get me, I don't get you."
I think that's right around the time I started picking up the books because I think I started it was after 50 or something or so. I think I started, or no, early 40s
Oh,
or
okay.
mid 40s when I started reading the book. So I definitely remember that scene, and because it was completely pointless and it accomplished nothing other than getting on his nerves.
Yeah.
So, that's Peter.
Exactly. And yeah, I rewatching that movie again and just seeing the scene where he just, webs down, pulls down the pants. I'm like, "Yep, that's Spider-Man."
Mm-hmm.
And it was just perfect. And a lot of people complain about Paul Giamatti in this movie playing, but I kind of like that they had him in there, and just even like the thing of him being the Rhino at the end. I didn't mind that because it gives you the sense that if you disconnected it from the Sinister Six stuff, right?
Right.
And like it just gives you the sense of Spider-Man's still doing this on an everyday basis. He's fighting guys like Rhino in this like every single day. It's not like a once every 3 years he fights a supervillain type of thing.
No, this is a constant presence. And
Yeah.
There's always there's lots of muggers and lots of stopping petty crimes. But I mean, people like the Rhino show up all the time that he
Yeah.
has to face. Just like at the end of the movie. And I mean, I didn't love it because it's like he's supposed to be mourning and everything, but at the same time, they did show the passage of time, and for him to finally be like, "All right, I'm going back out there," and then from the step right back into the role, and then take down Rhino and stuff. It was very cool to see that despite it all, despite
Mm-hmm.
losing the woman he loved more than anything in life, I mean, Spider-Man still gotta put down the evil when he crosses paths with him,
Yeah.
man.
Another thing, another scene that I just remembered, and this kind of goes back to when you were talking about the kid who collected Spider-Man in the
Hmm.
last episode, and
Yeah,
the scene with the kid who's getting bullied, and
yeah.
he comes in and he's geeking out over the kid's invention, right? Like that's just and he's
That's
just
what you
walking home
do.
with him. Yeah,
That's
and
what you
that's
do with a child, man. You're supposed to
yeah.
be excited for him. I mean, you haven't gotten there yet, but uh, Aaliyah, my daughter, will sit there and she'll build Legos or she'll draw
Mm-hmm.
something, and it's like she'll show it to me. Now, if anybody else's kid hands this to me, I'm like, okay, it's still a kid. I wouldn't do that. But let's say you drew a picture and you're like, hey man, check this out. I'm really proud of it. I
Mm-hmm.
was like, dude, it's not
Yeah,
that.
exactly. Yeah.
It's like you don't do that with a child. You're supposed to encourage that sense of wonder.
Mm-hmm.
You're supposed to and tell them that you want them to continue creating and stuff. You
Well, I
want them
mean,
to be able to
we're
things
doing
like that.
we I do kind of get a little bit of that sense with my daughter now because she's starting to learn how to crawl and everything like that.
There
So
you
like
go.
so
Yeah,
like
the encouragement.
even just like getting up on her knees, which usually she'll just kind of like pull herself across the ground.
Yeah.
But every now and then she'll get up on her knees and she'll like start pumping and like get ready to move forward. And and when we put her in this we got this walker thing too.
Hmm.
And she can go side to side and she can go back, but she can't really go. She can get like one step forward and that's it.
Hey, enjoy it while you can, because once
Yeah.
they start moving, it's over.
Yeah. Yeah.
Life was so easy, and all of a sudden, Aaliyah's like, and I'm like, what are you doing? Stay still. I've been saying that ever since. But you're supposed to encourage children like that.
Mm-hmm.
And again, very Spider-Man. Kudos to Garfield and the writers and everybody and the director, everything. He made time for that kid and made that
Mm-hmm.
kid's day, man. And
Yeah.
and and again, that's another big part of Spider-Man because Spider-Man is there for the little things and for the
Mm-hmm.
big things.
Right. Right. The friendly neighborhood Spider-Man thing. That was
Friendly neighborhood
that.
Spider-Man.
That's that aspect in that scene in that movie and the scene with the kid on the bridge in the first movie.
Hmm.
That those are the types of moments that sell that idea.
So there's so many good things in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
It's just why did it have to be so much in this one movie?
Exactly. Yeah. And I mean, and there's even with the villain stuff, like there's stuff we even get Ravencroft for the first time, and
Yeah.
we saw the Connor's in his cell, but it wasn't actually. I don't think they explicitly called it Ravencroft in that movie.
No, I don't think they explained too much.
But they explicitly call it out Ravencroft in this movie, and I don't know what they were doing with Dr. Kafka though, because Dr. Kafka in the comics is a woman, and here they make him into a man, and not only that, but like a German mad scientist type. It was so
Yeah,
bad.
I did not love that because Ashley Kafka was one of my favorite characters from the
Mm-hmm.
mid '90s because she was like the Doctor Ravencroft and she
Yeah.
was always involved in like the little stories and stuff, and eventually she got romantically involved with John Jameson.
Mm-hmm.
So I did like that character, and then to see them the gender switch didn't bother me, but for them to be again this mad scientist and then ultimately die,
Mm-hmm.
it's like what was the point of all that?
Yeah, it was so. It's like this is also like the stuff with you know Jamie Foxx's Matt Dillon and like being like Max Dillon, being
Matt Dillon.
Matt Dillon. Yeah.
Oh man, I don't know. Matt Dillon could have maybe done better than
He probably would have done a better job as Electro. Yeah. But yeah,
he
but the
might
whole
have.
like I keep getting the sense that it's like you got these weird Schumacher-esque elements. Like
Mhm.
it's like somebody spliced in these characters from the Schumacher Batman films into these movies. And it's like where you have Jamie Foxx is like Jim Carrey in Batman Forever, and I don't know what his name is. The guy who plays Kafka is like John Glover's Dr. Woodrue in Batman and Robin.
Yeah, yeah, uh, so many bad choices.
Mhm.
I can't say that enough. Um, do you want to talk about the death scene with Gwen and everything?
One I want to get one other thing first, and that
Yeah.
was I did like some of Harry's interactions with the board, right? Like when he comes in
Yeah.
and he's telling them and he's like, it's Mr. Osborne to you and all that. And like I did like that. And then he notices Felicia and he says that from now on everybody works for Felicia. Right. I did like those little moments when he asserts himself.
The again, that was something that Harry never was that great at.
Mm-hmm.
So to see him stepping into that role of his dad's, which is something important in his character arc throughout his history, and then to see him go to Felicia and say you answer Felicia and stuff, that's more world building. So if you don't immediately have Goblin die at the end of the film and you want to keep him around and go forward with him and then have Felicia over here to the side, they had so many pieces that they could have worked with. So that was very cool to see that too.
Yeah,
I like that piece too.
Now the death scene. You know what? I hate the way it's handled, but it still gets me every time.
Yeah.
I mean, and like Garfield, and he did the same thing with George's death in the first movie too. It's like he so sells that emotion, like you mentioned last episode, and he's just like you really feel that emotion. Like when he keeps repeating over and over, "Stay with me, stay with me." Like it's it is heartbreaking.
It messed me up in the movie theaters, and it still messed me up the last time I watched it.
Yeah,
you know he's not going to get to her, and I'm not a purist. I don't need her to be thrown off a bridge. I don't need y'all to do that crazy thing that they did, which I still believe that ultimate. You know the story. She was dead before she hit the water, but then there's a snap sound effect that they've taken out of reprints and stuff like that of when Spider-Man grabs him with the web. So I'm glad they didn't go that route. And they went. And the Raimi film obviously had Mary Jane thrown off the bridge several times in 1 and 3. She was thrown off bridges, so I'm glad they didn't go that way. And with everything just falling around them and him being so close and him trying to fire the web to save her, and like you said, the scene feels like it lasts forever until she hits the bottom, and they did not do her any favors. They want to make sure you realize she hit the bottom, because it wasn't like a slow motion, like and then her.
No, it's such a because it is going in slow motion, like the web is flying in slow motion, but then that snap is just boom, in real time. Yeah,
real time. She hits and then stops moving, and it's just like your stomach just sinks.
And there's that moment of silence right after.
Yes,
she's just hanging there, just like, and you're just like, oh shit, that just happened. Yeah, I mean, as much as I hate how that scene happened, like everything orchestrated around it, with the Goblin coming at the last minute and just being kind of tacked on, like
her conveniently being there now, to be picked up in the first place, because she was involved in taking out Electro. So I mean, but she wasn't there. I mean, she came into the fight to help Spider-Man, and then for her to conveniently be there for the plot, so that Harry can end up doing that to her.
But I did like how she asserted herself to Peter in that, right? When she comes into the power plant and she's like, she's reading him the riot act.
Well, they were fighting over that the whole movie, though. Again, it goes back to her dad saying protect her, and then she's like, you don't have to protect me. I can take care of myself, and all the details that go with that. So and again, that speaks to their chemistry, because Gwen and Peter didn't get along all the time. They didn't get along a lot in this movie. Some of it was a little overly dramatic with the breakups and the whole I'm going to go to London with you and things like that. They needed those set pieces to move the plot along and make this scene way more.
Yeah.
So to see them have that argument, they were arguing right before Green Goblin showed up.
Yeah.
And then for her to be gone like minutes later, like his last memories of her, it wasn't even like a happy memory. It wasn't even like he got to tell her goodbye or anything. It was literally like we're bickering, and then now you're dead.
Which is how it works in real life too, which makes it such a real moment too. Like all that stuff surrounding the death, aside, but just like that those moments were handled so well. And that's why this is such a frustrating movie, because there's so many good elements in it.
Right, right. Because if it's hard for me to tell somebody that one of the best Spider-Man scenes is an Amazing Spider-Man 2,
Mm-hmm.
because it's at the end of the movie and you got to go through so much shit just to
Yeah.
get to it,
Yeah.
that by the time, like, is it even worth the scene? And honestly, yes,
Mm-hmm.
it's worth everything else that they put us through this movie to get to the final, to the end of this movie. From the minute that Gwen starts falling
Mm-hmm.
through the Rhino fight, all of that works. Everything works from the beginning of the film up until pretty much Max is introduced, and then
Yeah.
Aunt
Yeah.
Louise starts, and then everything in there is just choppy from there.
Mm-hmm.
So the beginning's strong, the end is really strong.
Yeah.
It's I wish that I wish there had been a little. I don't know what the rush was, or what the the mandate was at Sony, that they had to put it out this way, or that they had to. And I get Avengers was big 2 years before,
Mm-hmm.
but the thing is, and again, DC's still learning this lesson. You can't build shared movie universes overnight, because that's
Yeah.
what they attempted to do. Marvel literally took 4 years to get to Avengers,
Exactly. Yeah.
and everywhere else is like, we'll do this real quick, and everybody will be here, and it'll be awesome. It's like, no, unless you have the perfect film,
Mm-hmm.
it's not going to work that way.
And
And
even so, like, Marvel had the perfect film, but it took time to get there.
yeah, yes, it did. If they had just come out in 2008 with the Avengers, it wouldn't have hit the
No,
same.
it would
I
not
don't
have
think it would
worked.
have. It'd been like, what are all these characters doing? We don't have that. You
There've
just
been
wouldn't
no
care.
backstory to any of the characters. You would, if you just drop into Avengers without knowing anything about it, you can follow it relatively okay, but you're going to be lost a lot, and you need that world building to really sell that movie.
Yeah. Um, and that's something that I think Marvel has learned over the years. I
Mm-hmm.
know that Avengers was the culmination of Phase 1, but even with stuff that we saw throughout Phase 2 and Phase 3 and the beginning of Phase 4, a lot of the movies you can just jump in, especially the
Mm-hmm.
Guardians movies. Guardians
Yeah,
movies are like a lot of people's um, gateway drugs to the
that's
MCU
how
movies.
that's how I introduced my wife to them, is through the Guardians movies.
There you go. There you go, because that's the best way to do it. They're funny, they're
Mm-hmm.
entertaining, and then it makes you say, "Well, you know what? Maybe I will try out something else,"
Mm-hmm.
and then you
Exactly.
start getting everything else. So to see all these great ideas that could have been different segments of movies, um, and again, I don't know what Garfield wanted to do. I don't know what Emma wanted to do. I But you feel like there was definitely going to be a third one, and
Mm-hmm.
there was room for all these stories to be told. This movie could have literally just been about the death of Gwen Stacy somehow,
Yes. Yeah.
and you eliminate the electro part. You go straight Goblin,
Mm-hmm.
straight Peter. You build more about Harry Osborn and Green Goblin mystique. You lean heavy into that. Keep all the parts with him and Gwen. You can still have your fun parts with the graduation,
Mm-hmm.
and you can even throw the Rhino in the beginning and end. It's not going to matter. That can be your second villain. But you focus on Green Goblin, and you tell Gwen and Peter's story. And then by the end, when you get to the emotional moment
Mm-hmm.
when Gwen goes down, starts falling, like that sounds like a perfect Spider-Man film. And I by no means have a screenplay or anything like that, but then you have these elements you could still introduce. You could do Electro another time, hopefully way better.
Yeah.
You got Felicia Hardy there. You have if you want to expand on the Rhino and the Sinister Six, that's there later.
Mm-hmm.
You can set up Norman. You can still do Peter's parents, but they just try to do too much
They
all
try
at
to do
once
too
for
much.
me.
I mean, and then they also had the, speak when you mentioned Peter's parents, it reminded me too, the whole Roosevelt thing, right? Where he's got this hidden subway card. It's just like,
And
when
there's
did
no
Richard,
payoff.
when did Richard Parker even have time to build that? And it's like,
I don't know. And one of the things I didn't like about either of these films, I know Peter's parents died when he was very little. He doesn't
mm-hmm.
remember them. He has this desire to know who they are. And I know they really wanted to work on us taking this journey with him to discover more about who his parents really were. None of the parent stuff really worked for me, because
Yeah,
they were such small elements in both films. And even if we got more in the third movie, I don't know it would have been the story, the payoff that I've been hoping for from
You
this
know what? I
film.
felt like because this movie was, I think it was heavily influenced by Casino Royale and Batman Begins, and that this whole idea
Yeah.
of like, we have to tell the untold story of Spider-Man's origins. Like, well, there is no untold story about it, and when you try to engineer it around that, it just doesn't work.
Yeah, Richard and Mary had nothing to do with him being
Mm-hmm.
Spider-Man.
Yeah,
Um, you can try to tell me that they had a lot to do with the person that Spider-Man's become, Peter Parker's become, but ultimately, no, that's all on May and
it's
Ben
all
because
May and
that,
Ben. Yeah,
yeah, that's who raised him. Now, if you
it's
want
like
to
it's
tell
like in
me,
that great scene when Sally Field says, she's like, "You're my boy. I raised you." And
yes, that was great.
mm-hmm,
Love that scene every time.
mm-hmm,
That's very, for someone who didn't want to be in the scene, she was very
mm-hmm,
present
yeah,
in that moment. That was great. So even if you want to spring these other ideas from his parents, which eventually will come into the Spider-Man
mm-hmm.
universe, it really has no bearing on the character whose story you're telling.
And it's like, I understand if you want to link Richard and Mary to his origin, and like, Richard worked for Oscorp, that's fine. But there's not really a whole other story behind that. It's just like, yeah, his research ended up influencing this other thing. But even still, I like the idea more that Peter gets bitten as an accident of fate, right? It's not something that happened because of who his father was or anything like that. It wasn't this
Right.
coincidence. It was just
He wasn't a test subject.
he was in the right place at the right time.
Yeah, and that's how the world got the Amazing Spider-Man.
Yeah, yeah. And what else was I gonna say? You know what I think? You know what you could do is I would have taken the Goblin stuff out of this. I would have just focused this on Electro, and then the
Mhm.
movie ends with Gwen going to Europe, right? And then
Which is great too, because Gwen took off to Europe in the comic books anyway.
exactly.
So that would have been great too. Even
And
if you got to
then
sit through a bad Electro story.
yeah, well, I mean, the Electro story I'd still make changes to that too. But even still, like
Please.
if you just focus on Electro in this movie, that's all you really need. And then you've got the setup at the end of the movie with Harry transforming and going to the Goblin suit, and Gwen going off to Europe now you've got the perfect setup for a third movie.
Yeah, your way might be a little bit better.
Mm-hmm. And also with her going off to Europe, then you can also introduce Mary Jane, which is what her scenes were cut in this movie, because there were two big scene cuts. One was Shailene Woodley was supposed to play Mary Jane.
Yes.
And then the other one is that the very end, and this where you find out that Richard Parker survived, and he comes up to Peter at the gravesite at the end. I'm not sure if you ever saw that scene.
What?
Yeah, it was really, it felt so forced.
Oh my god. Boy, if Richard Parker came up to Peter Parker in that movie, I'd been done.
They filmed it.
I need a refund.
They filmed
God
it.
bless
It's
America. Why?
they filmed it. You can go. It's on the special features, or you can probably find it on YouTube. But yeah,
that's May's boy.
yeah, they filmed it.
Richard.
Yeah, he came back to life, and I'm just like, that was like the why. There's
that
just
man
no.
survived an airplane explosion. Oh my god. Too much, man.
Yeah,
Why?
way too much. Way too much. That's the curse. And it's funny because both these iterations of Spider-Man made the same problems in the last movie. They both tried to do way too much in the last movie.
Yeah. And we know what happened with Raimi. Raimi wanted to tell a smaller scale story with multiple villains, and Sony got involved and said, "Hey,
well, not even." Yeah, he didn't even. He wanted. I don't even think he wanted Harry to be a big focus in that third movie. He wanted it to be Sandman as the main focus.
Yeah.
Like Harry was going to be in there, but Harry wasn't. They were going to set up Harry probably for like the fourth movie, if anything.
Yeah.
But
say la vie. What can you do?
All right. Well, comparing these two, like the Amazing Spider-Man movie that did too much and the Spider-Man movie that did too much, which one would you prefer?
Man, that's a tough one, honestly. The nostalgia of Spider-Man 3 is what my gut wants to say, but with all its faults, The Amazing Spider-Man 2 it moves so nicely along at a nice good clip. Things are constantly happening. You can get lost quite easily. Don't get me
Yeah,
wrong, because again, we've said this many times, folks. There's like 17 different things happening in the plot,
exactly. Yeah.
but it moves along at such a nice clip. Spider-Man 3 slows down quite considerably, at least 2 to 3 times in the
Yeah.
middle of the film. So I'd have to say, if I had to choose between the two, I'd say Amazing Spider-Man 2
Hmm.
would be the one that I would watch. I think I enjoy Spider-Man 3 more overall, despite its many, many flaws too. Um, but for being probably the most terrible Spider-Man movie that's been released to date, um, it goes the pacing of it is very good, so it's very
Hmm.
watchable still, which is crazy.
I will put this one above Spider-Man 3. I think it's
Yeah,
because the even despite all the villain, both of them had the same villain problems. Um, but despite, so you could put that aside because both of them had the exact same villain problems.
yeah,
Where it's
that
just
was
they're three villains. It's just way too much trying to do too much with these villains, and none of them get the proper amount of development. Um, but the everything else in Amazing Spider-Man 2, I think, is better because you've got this really strong core with um, with Peter and Gwen, and
and the
that
cast is better too.
the
Having a better
cast is
cast
better. Yeah,
helps.
that chemistry between Garfield and Stone is just so much better than the you can't even call it chemistry between Maguire and Dunst because it did not exist. It was like
They phoned it in
anti-chemistry.
so
Yeah,
hard on 3, man. They phoned it in so hard. Other than Franco and Dancing Peter, like everybody phoned in all the performances in
yeah,
Spider-Man 3.
yeah. And it's also when you think about the just the way they behave, like yeah, they have in both of them, Peter has conflicts with his girlfriend, they're butting heads, but like going back to what we're saying about with May and Ben, like it feels more real in Amazing Spider-Man 2, whereas in Spider-Man 3 it's she's she's having a rough time and Peter's trying to sympathize with her and she's being a total bitch to him about it.
Yeah, she is. She's like, you don't understand. You're not a struggling. I'm supposed to be on Broadway, Peter.
Yeah, and
It's like,
it's like,
oh,
bitch, he just spent like what, like the past 5 years getting completely torn apart by the city of New York. I think he
yes.
knows a little bit about rejection.
Yeah, just a little bit. Oh, and she
Yeah,
was so jealous of Spider-Man Day.
yeah, yeah,
She did
yeah.
not like that at all. I mean, he
And
didn't
plus,
even get
like,
kisses
well, also
Gwen,
too, like,
but
even if the roles were forced, like each role had a purpose in
right.
Amazing Spider-Man 2. Gwen Stacy in Spider-Man 3 had zero purpose. Like you could cut her scenes completely and the movie would not be affected at all.
It affects nothing.
Yeah.
She was literally there to be a hot looking rival to
Mm.
MJ, and
And
for
she
her to
was never even really a rival either.
no, other than her kissing Spider-Man
Yeah, yeah.
randomly. That was just something else to make Mary J mad.
Right.
And then I did the scene where Spider-Man saves her, but I do think that was really well done
That
as
was
well.
yeah, yeah, it was well done. Yeah.
So that was cool. But other than that's it. There's no big deal with
So
that.
yeah, so yeah, I definitely take this one over Spider-Man 3. I think it's a much stronger movie all around, flaws aside.
Yeah,
Um but all
we
right.
agree.
Yeah. So any final thoughts, Kel, on either of these movies, I guess? The web series in general?
Well, again, when I suggest this to you, I was ready to eviscerate both of these movies because when you watch them, especially after we've gotten all the iterations of Holland's
Hmm.
Spider-Man, it's really easy to dismiss these because there's only two of them. They're not as uh why they're not as loved as the Raimi films.
Right.
So it's real easy to be like, oh man, they were terrible and blah blah blah. Garfield was too cool to be Peter, and he was a good Spider-Man though, but he's too cool to be Peter. And the second one was real bad, and Jamie Foxx is awful, and like
Hmm.
all those things can be true, but there's a lot of things that work in both films.
Yeah.
The first one, the first one's a solid film. Like I said last episode, you can watch that one. I do recommend that one.
Hmm.
I recommend you watch Spider-Man 2, Amazing Spider-Man 2 as well. I cannot promise you you'll like it. I do, and I did enjoy it more than I thought I would. Uh and then also I have that bias, that little thing that's it's a Spider-Man film. So of course I might enjoy it, but with all its flaws, just like Spider-Man 3, there's a lot to like in this movie, and it has a great beginning, it has a great end, and the movie moves on a nice enough clip where you can sit down and throw it on in the background or just sit and watch the whole movie and you'll enjoy it. Now, not the best performances from Jamie Foxx or the Green Goblin, of course, but we don't know who to blame on that.
Hmm.
But it's a watchable movie, you know. It's definitely a watchable movie. So check them both out. And Perry, I think you've changed my mind on my Amazing Spider-Man film hate because I did not. But when I suggested this, I was like, yes, he does. I'm just gonna go in here and be like this is awful and blah blah blah. But I did really enjoy myself watching both films again.
Yeah, yeah,
You should too.
they're and I think one of the big strengths that the Raimi films had is that they came in at a point where we had really nothing else out there.
Nothing. Yes.
I mean, you had X-Men, but even X-Men was like very much, it was trying to. It was one of those things where like it was ashamed of being a superhero movie. Like
X-Men 2000 was is it's different, man.
yeah, yeah, and but Raimi's Spider-Man, that was like the first superhero movie probably since Superman the movie that was really out and proud about being a superhero movie, right?
Oh
it was
yeah.
it was it was unapologetically joyous in its celebration of being a superhero movie.
Waving the superhero pride
Yeah,
flag.
yeah,
Flag.
and there was nothing else like that at the time. So
None.
so even though you go back and you watch those movies, and yeah, they have flaws. Like they are not, I think a lot of people are looking at those movies with rose-colored glasses because there's a lot of cheesiness in those movies.
There's a lot, a ton.
And these movies had, I think if these movies had came out in 2002, they would have been much more well received.
I couldn't imagine getting these movies in 2002.
Yeah, I mean, but
My
they
mind
came
would have been
out.
blown.
Yeah, but they came out in a post Avengers world. So, and it's kind of like it reminds me of Days of Future Past in a lot of the ways, because Days of Future Past kind of had this same problem where it feels like a movie that should have come out before Avengers.
Right. Uh, I know exactly what you mean because literally they're like, "Hey, we're getting the gang back together,"
Hmm.
and then it's like, "Okay, we got the gang back together. Here it is." Everybody's like, thanks.
Yeah,
We
yeah,
appreciate it, but we don't really appreciate it. So
yeah, yeah, yeah. So yeah, I mean
I held that.
they're uneven movies is basically what it comes down to, but the they're worth watching just on the strength of Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone alone, and the and like you said, that first scene in Amazing Spider-Man 2 is just pitch perfect Spider-Man. And like those things alone, like the casting of everyone who's not a villain is perfect, and those moments, those human moments, they're really, and that's Mark Webb's background, right? I mean, he directed 500 Days of Summer, and that was a great movie.
That's true. Cult classic right there.
Hmm.
I don't even know if it's a cult classic. It's just a classic. A lot
Yeah,
of people.
yeah. So yeah, they're worth watching. I mean, if you have to fast forward through the supervillain parts, then go ahead, but it is worth it just for the interactions between Peter and Gwen.
I'm sure there is a Amazing Spider-Man 2 supercut out there somewhere that has no villains in it. So
Oh, I'm
you'll
probably
enjoy that
probably
more.
yeah.
They got those things all over the place now.
Yeah. All right. Well, Kel, thanks a lot for coming on and
Oh,
for
absolutely, man.
for sitting for looking at over 3 hours on the Zoom counter here that we've been sitting talking.
No problem. I'm used to going for at least 3 hours when I sit down and record a podcast. So,
Awesome, good.
I do a lot of talking, so I don't mind at all. I appreciate you letting me talk about the Amazing Spider-Man films with you.
Well, happy to have you come on. Got to have you come back on again at some point.
Yeah, 100%. I will be here. Absolutely.
Awesome, 100%. You said it again.
I know. I did that one on purpose. I said 100%, and then I was like, absolutely.
Okay. All right. Okay. Before we finish up, tell people where they can find you.
You can find me on, let's do social media this time. So you can find me on Twitter at B-Hyphen. On Instagram, I am the B-Hyphen. On Facebook, -universe, but I'm rarely over there because nobody pays attention on Facebook. And then Yeah, those are the main places I can be found. And if you really want to see some me be goofy, you can follow me on TikTok, I guess. I
Is
think
that
I'm the
all?
B-Hyphen on
The
there.
B-Hyphen. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Well, that does it for another episode of Superhero Cinephiles. Come back next time, where I believe, if I'm not mistaken, we're going to have kind of a different thing. We're going to be talking about politics and superheroes in light of all this Dean Cain bullshit. So you got Van Allen Plexco's planning to come on, and we're going to be talking about politics and
Van.
superheroes. Yes.
Shout out
Yeah.
to Van.
Yeah.
That's what's up.
So come join us for a special discussion. Otherwise, head over to superherocinephiles.com. Superhero Cinephiles, the Facebook group, Super Cinema Pod on Twitter and Instagram. Be sure to like, be sure to subscribe, be sure to review, be sure to toss us some money through Buy Me a Coffee or PayPal or Patreon or whatever you like. Thanks again for watching. Thanks again for listening, and we will see you next time. Thanks for watching. Visit us on the web at superherocinephiles.com, and remember to subscribe to watch more of our videos.
Thank you for listening. And as always, good night, good evening. God bless.